The notification popped up on my phone at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Rebecca Chen has sent you photos. I stared at the name, confused. Rebecca Chen was my husband David's boss at the marketing firm. A sharp, ambitious woman in her early 40s who I'd met exactly twice at company Christmas parties. We weren't friends. We weren't even acquaintances. We had never exchanged phone numbers. Why? So why was she sending me photos? I opened the message thread, and my world tilted sideways. The first photo showed David and Rebecca at what looked like an expensive restaurant, leaning close together over champagne. David's hand was on her thigh. The second showed them walking hand in hand through what I recognized as the Dubai Marina. The third was David kissing Rebecca against the backdrop of the Burj Khalifa. But it was the fourth photo that made my hands shake. David and Rebecca in bed together, clearly taken the morning after, both naked from the waist up, her head on his chest, both of them smiling at the camera with the satisfied glow of people who just had excellent sex. I scrolled down to see Rebecca's message. David, last night was incredible. I can't wait to get back to the hotel room tonight. Love you. 2 hearts. She'd meant to send these to David. Instead, she'd sent them to his wife. I sat in my car outside the grocery store for 20 minutes, staring at the photos and trying to process what I was seeing. David had been in Dubai for the past week on what he'd called, quote, a crucial business development trip with the senior management team. He'd been texting me every day about boring client meetings and networking dinners. Apparently, the only networking he'd been doing was with his boss's body. My first instinct was to call him immediately and scream. My second was to drive to Rebecca's house and confront her. My third was to post the photos on social media and let the entire world see what cheating liars they both were. But as I sat there, a different kind of anger began to replace the shock and hurt. This wasn't just betrayal, it was stupidity. They'd been careless enough to take photos, and Rebecca had been careless enough to send them to the wrong person. If they were going to be stupid, I was going to be smart. I drove home and spent the next hour researching everything I could about Rebecca Chen and David's company. Rebecca was married to a prominent divorce attorney named James Chen. She'd been with the marketing firm for 8 years, and had been promoted to creative director just 6 months ago. The company had a strict policy against fraternization between supervisors and subordinates. More importantly, Rebecca's husband James specialized in high-asset divorce cases and had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in protecting his clients' interests. David, meanwhile, had been at the company for 3 years and was up for promotion to senior account manager, a promotion that would be decided by Rebecca and the other senior management team members. An idea began to form. I screenshot all of Rebecca's photos and messages, then forwarded them to my personal email account. I also saved them to cloud storage and printed physical copies. If I was going to use this evidence, I needed to make sure it couldn't disappear. Then I did something that surprised even me. I replied to Rebecca's message, I think you meant to send these to someone else. But since you sent them to me, I thought you should know that your husband James might be very interested in seeing them. Especially the one of you in bed with my husband. I sent the message and turned off my phone. 3 hours later, when I turned it back on, I had 17 missed calls from Rebecca and 43 text messages, ranging from panicked apologies to threats to desperate pleas for me to, quote, please not ruin her life over one mistake. I ignored all of them and called my lawyer instead. Julia, it's Sarah. I need to talk to you about divorce proceedings. Oh, Sarah, I'm so sorry. What happened? My husband's been having an affair with his boss, and I have photos. The next morning, I received a call from James Chen. Mrs. Rodriguez? This is James Chen, Rebecca's husband. I believe we need to talk. I believe we do. We met that afternoon at a coffee shop downtown. James was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, well-dressed, and radiating the kind of controlled fury that comes from discovering your spouse has been photographing her adultery. I assume you've seen the photos, I said as we sat down. Rebecca showed them to me last night after you contacted her. She's devastated about the mistake. I'm sure she is. Though I noticed she didn't seem devastated about the adultery itself. James almost smiled. No, she seemed quite happy about that part. It's only the getting caught that's upset her. We looked at each other across the table, 2 betrayed spouses trying to figure out what to do with our cheating partners. What are you planning to do? James asked. Divorce him. take half of everything. Make sure he faces professional consequences for sleeping with his boss. And Rebecca? That depends. What are you planning to do? James was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. Rebecca and I have been married for 12 years. We have 2 children together. She's made a terrible mistake, but I'm not sure I'm ready to end our marriage over it. I studied his face, trying to read between the lines. But you're not going to just ignore it either. No, I'm not going to ignore it. Rebecca needs to understand that actions have consequences. What kind of consequences? The kind that ensure she never makes this mistake again, and the kind that protect my children from the fallout of their mother's poor decisions. I realized that James was thinking like a lawyer, even in the midst of his personal crisis. He was looking for a solution that protected his interests while minimizing the damage to his family. I have a proposition, I said. I'm listening. You help me make sure David faces appropriate professional consequences, and I'll help you make sure Rebecca understands the full implications of her choices without destroying your family in the process. What kind of professional consequences? David violated company policy by having a relationship with his supervisor. He should be fired. And since Rebecca was the supervisor in the relationship, she should face consequences too. You want me to help you get them both fired? I want you to help me make sure the company's HR department understands exactly what happened in Dubai. What they do with that information is up to them. James nodded slowly. And in exchange? In exchange, I keep the photos private. No social media, no public humiliation, no scandal that would affect your children. Just professional consequences for professional misconduct. And your divorce from David? That's between me and David. But if Rebecca cooperates with my requests, I won't name her as a co-respondent in the divorce proceedings. James extended his hand. Deal. We spent the next hour planning our strategy. James would contact the company's HR director and request a meeting about serious policy violations involving senior management. I would provide copies of the photos and messages as evidence of the inappropriate relationship. Meanwhile, Rebecca would voluntarily take a leave of absence to, quote, deal with personal issues, which would allow the company to investigate without having to immediately suspend her. What about David? James asked. David doesn't know that I know. I'm going to let him hang himself. That evening, David called me from Dubai, full of stories about boring client presentations and terrible hotel food. How's the networking going? I asked innocently. Oh, you know how these things are. A lot of handshaking and business card exchanges. Rebecca's been great at introducing me to the right people. I'm sure she has. I should be home Friday evening. Maybe we can go out to dinner this weekend? That sounds lovely. I'll make reservations somewhere special. After we hung up, I called the most expensive restaurant in the city and made a reservation for Saturday night. If David wanted to take me out to dinner, I was going to make sure it was memorable. The next morning, James called to update me on his conversation with HR. The HR director was very interested in the photos. Apparently, this isn't the first time Rebecca has been involved in questionable behavior with subordinates, though it's the first time there's been photographic evidence. What's the company planning to do? They're conducting a full investigation. David will be questioned when he returns from Dubai, and Rebecca has been asked to take immediate leave pending the investigation's outcome. Has Rebecca been told about the investigation? Not yet. The company wants to question David first before Rebecca has a chance to coach him on his responses. That afternoon, I received a call from Rebecca. Sarah, please, we need to talk. I think we've said everything we need to say. No, you don't understand. If the company finds out about this, it won't just affect David and me. It'll affect my children, my family, everything I've worked for. You should have thought about that before you took photos of yourself in bed with my husband. It was a mistake. One stupid mistake. Please don't let it ruin multiple lives. Rebecca, you've been having an affair with my husband for months. The only mistake was getting caught. How do you know it's been months? I'd been bluffing, but her question confirmed what I'd suspected. Because people don't go from professional colleagues to taking naked photos in Dubai hotel rooms overnight. This has been going on for a while. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. What do you want? I want you to tell me the truth about how long this has been going on and how it started. Why? Because the more I know about your relationship with David, the better I can prepare for my divorce proceedings. Another long pause. It started about 4 months ago. We were working late on the Henderson campaign, and we ended up going for drinks afterward. One thing led to another. And the Dubai trip? We planned it specifically so we could spend time together away from the office. David told you it was a business development trip, but it was really just us. So the company paid for your romantic getaway? The company paid for a legitimate business trip. We just made it romantic. Rebecca, you used company funds to finance your adultery. That's not just a policy violation, it's fraud. It's not fraud. We did meet with clients in Dubai. After you finished having sex in your hotel room that the company paid for. I could hear Rebecca crying on the other end of the line. Sarah, please, I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But please don't destroy my entire life over this. I'm not destroying your life, Rebecca. I'm just making sure you face appropriate consequences for your choices. You destroyed your own life when you decided to sleep with my husband and photograph it. What do you want me to do? I want you to cooperate with HR's investigation. I want you to tell them the truth about your relationship with David, including how long it's been going on and how you used company resources to facilitate it. And if I do that, then I won't make the photos public. Your children won't have to see pictures of their mother cheating on their father posted on social media. That's blackmail. No, that's consequences. You sent me photos of yourself having an affair with my husband. I'm giving you the opportunity to handle this professionally instead of publicly. Rebecca agreed to cooperate with the investigation. Friday evening, David came home from Dubai with gifts, a silk scarf for me and stories about the successful client meetings he'd supposedly had. You look tired, I said as he unpacked his suitcase. It was a long week, a lot of late nights working on the presentations. I'm sure you worked very hard. David pulled out a small box and handed it to me. I brought you something special. Inside was a pair of gold earrings from a high-end jewelry store in Dubai. They were beautiful, and they probably cost more than David usually spent on gifts. They're lovely, I said. You must have had a very successful trip to be able to afford these. Rebecca was really impressed with my work. She thinks I'm a shoo-in for the promotion. I'm sure she was very impressed. We went to dinner Saturday night at the expensive restaurant I'd chosen. David was in an excellent mood, talking about his career prospects and the exciting projects he'd be working on with Rebecca. You seem really happy, I observed as we shared dessert. I am happy. Work is going great, we're doing well financially, and I have a beautiful wife who supports my career. David reached across the table and took my hand. I know I've been working a lot lately, but it's all going to pay off. I'm sure it will. On Monday morning, David left for work in high spirits. He called me around 10 to tell me that HR wanted to meet with him about the Dubai trip. Probably just routine debriefing about the client meetings, he said. Rebecca mentioned they might want to discuss expanding our international business development efforts. That sounds promising. David called again at noon, and his tone had changed completely. Sarah, I need to come home. Something's happened at work. What kind of something? I can't talk about it on the phone. I'll be home in an hour. When David walked through the door, he looked like he'd been hit by a truck. His face was pale, his hands were shaking, and he couldn't make eye contact with me. David, what happened? He sat down heavily on the couch. Sarah, I need to tell you something terrible. I sat down across from him, trying to look concerned rather than satisfied. What is it? HR showed me some photos today. Photos of me and Rebecca in Dubai. What kind of photos? Photos that prove we were having an affair. I let the silence stretch out, watching David struggle with how much to admit. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake. I never meant for this to happen. How long has it been going on? A few months. Since we started working on the Henderson campaign together. And the Dubai trip? We planned it so we could spend time together. I know how that sounds, but I swear it wasn't supposed to happen this way. How was it supposed to happen, David? I don't know. I wasn't thinking clearly. Rebecca and we just connected, but it was never supposed to affect our marriage. I looked at my husband of 7 years, this man who had been planning a romantic getaway with his boss while lying to me about business meetings, and felt nothing but contempt. David, HR showed you photos. Where did those photos come from? I don't know. Rebecca says she doesn't know either. Someone must have seen us in Dubai and taken pictures. I almost laughed. David still didn't know that Rebecca had taken the photos herself and accidentally sent them to me. What's going to happen at work? I'm suspended pending investigation. So is Rebecca. They're looking into whether we violated company policy and whether we used company resources inappropriately. Did you? Yes. We both did. David looked at me with desperate eyes. Sarah, I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But we can work through this, right? We can go to counseling, figure out how to move forward. David, you've been lying to me for months. You used our joint credit card to buy gifts for your mistress. You told me you were in boring business meetings while you were actually on a romantic vacation with another woman. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But people make mistakes, right? People can change? I stood up and walked to the kitchen, returning with a manila envelope. What's that? David asked. Divorce papers. David's face went white. Sarah, please. Don't make any hasty decisions. We can work through this. I'm not making a hasty decision. I'm making a well-informed decision based on clear evidence of your infidelity and dishonesty. I handed him the envelope. I filed these this morning. You're being served with papers requesting dissolution of marriage on grounds of adultery. This morning? But when did you find out? Rebecca sent me the photos by mistake. She meant to send them to you, but she sent them to your wife instead. David stared at me in shock. She sent you the photos? Thursday afternoon. The ones of you in bed together. The ones of you kissing in front of the Burj Khalifa. All of them. And you've known since Thursday? I've known since Thursday. But you let me come home, you went to dinner with me, you acted like everything was normal. I acted like everything was normal because I wanted to see how much you would lie to me when given the opportunity. And you lied about everything, David. Everything. David buried his face in his hands. Sarah, please. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. There's nothing to fix. You made your choice when you started sleeping with Rebecca. I'm making mine now. What about the house? Our savings? Everything we built together. My lawyer will be in touch about asset division. Since Texas is a community property state and you committed adultery, I'm confident the division will be favorable to me. David looked up at me with a mixture of desperation and anger. You're really going to destroy our entire marriage over one mistake? I'm not destroying our marriage, David. You already did that when you decided to cheat on me with your boss and lie about it for months. But Rebecca said. David stopped himself. Rebecca said what? Nothing. Never mind. No, tell me what Rebecca said. David was quiet for a long moment. She said that if we were careful, no one would ever have to know. She said affairs happen all the time, and most couples work through them. So this wasn't just a physical affair. You were planning a future together. No, that's not what I meant. David, stop lying. You've been caught. Rebecca has been caught. It's over. I picked up my purse and headed for the door. Where are you going? David asked. To stay with my sister while you pack your things. I want you out of the house by tomorrow evening. Sarah, wait, please. Can't we at least talk about this? I turned around to look at him one last time. We just did. 6 weeks later, the company completed its investigation. David was terminated for violating the fraternization policy and misusing company resources. Rebecca was also terminated, though her violation was considered more severe since she was the supervisor in the relationship. Both of them were required to reimburse the company for the costs associated with the Dubai trip, since it had been approved under false pretenses. Rebecca's husband James filed for separation but not divorce, citing the need to protect their children from the scandal. He gained temporary custody of their kids and moved to a different city with them, while Rebecca dealt with the professional and personal consequences of her choices. David tried to fight the divorce, but the photographic evidence of his adultery made his position untenable. The settlement awarded me 60% of our joint assets, including the house, and required David to pay spousal support for 3 years. He moved in with his parents and started looking for a new job, though his termination for cause made that search difficult. Rebecca eventually found work at a smaller marketing firm, but at a significantly lower salary, and without the management responsibilities she'd had before. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I received a text message from an unknown number. "This is Rebecca. I wanted you to know that I'm sorry for what I did to your marriage. I know it doesn't change anything, but I regret my choices and the pain they caused." I read the message twice, then deleted it without responding. A week later, David called me. "Sarah, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to apologize. Really apologize. Not just for getting caught, but for what I did to you and to our marriage. Thank you for saying that. I also wanted you to know that I'm in therapy now, trying to understand why I made such terrible choices. I'm not asking for forgiveness or a second chance. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to become a better person. I hope you succeed, David. Not for my sake, but for the sake of whoever you end up with next. I don't think there will be anyone else for a long time. I have a lot of work to do on myself first." We talked for a few more minutes, and I was surprised to find that I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt nothing. David had become a stranger to me. Someone from my past who had made poor choices that affected my life but no longer had the power to hurt me. 6 months later, I was contacted by a woman named Lisa who'd heard about my situation through mutual friends. "I think my husband is having an affair with his boss," she told me over coffee. "But I don't have any proof, and I don't know what to do." I spent the next hour telling Lisa about my experience and helping her develop a plan for gathering evidence and protecting her interests. "The most important thing," I told her, "is to be smart about how you handle it. Don't react emotionally. Don't confront them until you have all the facts. And make sure you protect yourself financially before you reveal what you know." Lisa followed my advice and eventually discovered that her husband was indeed having an affair. But because she'd been prepared, she was able to handle the situation on her terms, rather than being blindsided like I had been. As I helped Lisa navigate her divorce, I realized that my experience with David and Rebecca had taught me something valuable. Sometimes the worst betrayals can become opportunities to help other people avoid the same pain. Rebecca's mistake in sending me those photos had been the best thing that could have happened to me. It had given me the evidence I needed to protect myself and the time I needed to plan my response strategically. If she had sent those photos to David instead of to me, I might have remained married to a cheating husband for years, never knowing that the man I trusted was lying to me every day. Instead, her stupidity had set me free. A year after my divorce was finalized, I started a blog called Accidentally Exposed, where I shared stories about affairs that were discovered through technological mistakes. The blog attracted thousands of readers who shared their own stories of accidentally discovering infidelity through misdirected texts, forgotten open browser tabs, and photos sent to the wrong contacts. What surprised me was how many of these stories had positive endings. Like me, many people who discovered affairs through accidental exposure were able to handle the situation more strategically than those who discovered infidelity through suspicion or gradual realization. "When someone accidentally gives you proof of their betrayal," I wrote in one blog post, "they're actually giving you the gift of certainty. No more wondering, no more doubting your instincts, no more being gaslighted into thinking you're paranoid. Just clear, undeniable evidence that allows you to make informed decisions about your future." 2 years after my divorce, I received an email from a reader named Amanda. "Sarah, I just wanted to thank you for sharing your story. My husband's mistress accidentally sent me a video of them together. She meant to send it to her best friend for advice about whether to leave her own husband. Reading your blog helped me realize that I had been given an opportunity, not just a disaster. I was able to gather additional evidence, protect my assets, and file for divorce on my terms. I'm now happily divorced and starting a new career that I love. None of that would have happened if I'd just confronted them immediately like my emotions wanted me to do." Stories like Amanda's reminded me that Rebecca's mistake hadn't just changed my life. It had changed how I thought about betrayal, consequences, and the importance of responding strategically to life's unexpected challenges. Rebecca had meant to send David photos of their romantic getaway. Instead, she'd sent them to his wife, who used them to end both their affair and their careers. It was the perfect example of how one small mistake can have enormous consequences, and how sometimes those consequences are exactly what needed to happen. I never thanked Rebecca for her mistake, but I probably should have. After all, If she hadn't accidentally sent me those photos, I might still be married to David, still believing his lies, still funding his romantic vacations with my joint credit card. Instead, I was free, financially secure, and helping other people navigate similar betrayals. Rebecca had thought she was sending David photos that would make him happy. Instead, she'd sent his wife the evidence she needed to destroy them both. Sometimes the biggest mistakes lead to the best outcomes, just not for the people who make them. 3 years after my divorce, I received a call that would prove Rebecca's mistake had consequences far beyond what any of us had imagined. Ms. Rodriguez? This is Detective Martinez with the Dallas Police Department. I'm calling about Rebecca Chen. My blood ran cold. What about her? She's been arrested on charges of embezzlement and fraud. During our investigation, we discovered that you were involved in exposing her previous misconduct at Morrison Marketing. We'd like to speak with you about what you know regarding her pattern of behavior. I agreed to meet with Detective Martinez the following day. When I arrived at the police station, I was surprised to find James Chen waiting in the lobby. "Sarah," he said, standing up when he saw me. "I didn't expect to see you here." "James, I thought you and Rebecca had worked things out." "We tried, but it turns out the affair with David wasn't Rebecca's only secret." Detective Martinez led us into a conference room where another investigator, Detective Park, was waiting with several thick file folders. "Ms. Rodriguez, Mr. Chen, thank you both for coming in. We're investigating a case involving Rebecca Chen and approximately $400,000 in missing funds from her current employer, Hartwell & Associates." Detective Park opened one of the files. "What we've discovered is that Ms. Chen has been systematically embezzling money from her clients' accounts over the past 18 months. She was using sophisticated methods to hide the theft, but she made one crucial mistake." "What kind of mistake?" I asked. "She sent an email detailing her methods to the wrong person, just like she did with those photos 3 years ago." James looked stunned. "She sent what to whom?" "She meant to send an encrypted email to her offshore account manager, explaining how she was moving the stolen funds through various shell companies. Instead, she sent it to her assistant, who immediately forwarded it to the company's compliance officer." I felt a strange sense of déjà vu. Rebecca had a pattern of sending sensitive information to the wrong people. "How long has this been going on?" James asked. "We believe she started embezzling funds about 6 months after she was fired from Morrison Marketing," Detective Martinez explained. "It appears that losing her high-paying job put her in significant financial distress." James buried his face in his hands. "She told me she was doing well at the new company. She said her salary was almost as good as what she made before." "Her salary was about half what she made at Morrison," Detective Park said. "She was supplementing it with stolen money." "What does this mean for the children?" I asked James. "It means they're going to find out their mother is not just an adulterer, but a criminal. It means the custody arrangement I worked so hard to keep private is about to become very public." Detective Martinez leaned forward. "Mr. Chen, we understand this is difficult for your family, but we need to ask about your finances. Did you benefit from any of the money Rebecca stole?" "What do you mean?" "Did she use stolen funds to pay for household expenses, children's activities, mortgage payments, anything that would have benefited your family?" James looked horrified. "I don't know. How would I know if the money she was contributing to our expenses was stolen?" "We'll need to examine your family's financial records for the past 18 months. If Rebecca used stolen money for family expenses, you could be considered an unwitting accomplice." "Even if I didn't know the money was stolen?" "The courts will have to determine what you knew and when you knew it." I watched James process this information and felt a mixture of sympathy and satisfaction. Rebecca's pattern of poor decisions was now threatening to destroy not just her life, but her children's lives as well. "Detective Martinez," I said, "you mentioned that Rebecca has a pattern of behavior. What exactly do you mean?" "We've been investigating similar cases across Texas, and we've found 3 other instances where Ms. Chen sent incriminating information to the wrong recipients. In each case, it exposed misconduct that had been going on for months or years. 3 other instances? Detective Park pulled out another file. In 2019, while she was still at Morrison Marketing, she accidentally sent client billing information to a competitor, exposing the fact that she was inflating project costs and pocketing the difference. But she wasn't prosecuted for that, James said, because Morrison Marketing handled it internally to avoid negative publicity. They required her to pay restitution and agreed not to press charges if she resigned quietly. She never told me about that, James said quietly. Then in 2021, she accidentally sent a text message meant for her divorce attorney to her marriage counselor, revealing that she was hiding assets from you during your separation proceedings. My mouth fell open. She was hiding assets from James? About $50,000 in a separate account that she'd funded with money skimmed from various sources over the years. James looked like he'd been punched. She was stealing from me too? And in 2022, she accidentally forwarded an email to her entire company contact list that contained screenshots of her online dating profile, along with explicit messages she'd been sending to potential matches. She was dating other people while we were trying to reconcile? James asked. According to the messages, she'd been actively dating throughout your entire separation, while telling you she wanted to work on your marriage. I looked at James, whose face had gone from shock to resignation to something that looked like relief. So the affair with David wasn't an isolated incident, I said. Based on our investigation, David was one of at least 7 men Rebecca was involved with over the past 4 years, Detective Martinez said. What made David different was that she used company resources to facilitate that relationship, and she was his supervisor. 7 men? James said weakly. We've identified evidence of her affairs with a client at Morrison Marketing, 2 colleagues at Hartwell & Associates, a contractor working on your house renovation, a personal trainer, and a man she met through an online dating app. All while she was married to you, I added, looking at James. All while she was telling me she wanted to save our marriage and asking me to give her another chance. Detective Park closed the files. Mr. Chen, Ms. Rodriguez, we're sharing this information with you because Rebecca's pattern of accidentally exposing her own misconduct suggests a psychological compulsion that goes beyond simple carelessness. What do you mean? I asked. Our consulting psychologist believes Rebecca may have been subconsciously sabotaging herself. The probability of accidentally sending sensitive information to the wrong person once is low. The probability of doing it 4 times in 4 years suggests either extreme carelessness or an unconscious desire to be caught. She wanted to be caught? She may have been unable to stop her destructive behavior on her own, so her subconscious found ways to force external intervention. James looked thoughtful. That actually makes sense. Rebecca always seems stressed about keeping track of her lies. She had spreadsheets to remember which stories she'd told which people. Spreadsheets? Detective Martinez asked. To keep track of her cover stories for the affairs, the work lies, the financial deceptions. She was always terrified of accidentally revealing something to the wrong person. And yet she kept accidentally revealing things to the wrong people, I observed. Exactly. We spent another hour discussing the details of Rebecca's case and the evidence the police had gathered. By the time we left, I had a complete picture of a woman whose life had been a carefully constructed web of lies that she'd been systematically destroying through her own mistakes. Sarah, James said as we walked to the parking garage, I owe you an apology. For what? 3 years ago, when we made that agreement about handling Rebecca's affair professionally instead of publicly, I thought I was protecting my children from scandal. But if I'd let you expose her publicly back then, maybe it would have forced her to get help before she escalated to embezzlement. James, you were trying to do the right thing for your kids. But my attempt to minimize the consequences of her actions may have enabled her to commit worse crimes. I thought about that as I drove home. Had our decision to handle Rebecca's affair quietly actually made things worse? If she'd faced public humiliation 3 years ago, would that have been the wake-up call she needed to change her behavior? Or would she have just become more careful about hiding her misconduct? That evening, I called my therapist, Dr. Williams, whom I'd been seeing since my divorce. It sounds like you're questioning whether you handled Rebecca's affair in the right way, she said after I explained the situation. I'm wondering if I was too focused on my own revenge and not focused enough on making sure Rebecca actually faced meaningful consequences. What do you mean? Getting her fired was satisfying, but it didn't actually address the underlying issues that led to her affair. If anything, losing her job may have created the financial pressure that led to her embezzlement. Sarah, you're not responsible for Rebecca's subsequent choices. You exposed misconduct that deserved to be exposed. What Rebecca did afterward was her decision. But what if? What if nothing? Rebecca's pattern of behavior shows that she was already engaged in financial misconduct while she was at Morrison Marketing. The embezzlement at her new job wasn't caused by losing her previous job. It was a continuation of behavior that was already established. Dr. Williams was right, but I still felt unsettled by the idea that Rebecca's downward spiral might have been accelerated by the consequences she'd faced for her affair with David. The next morning, I received a call from Detective Martinez. "Ms. Rodriguez, I have an unusual request. Rebecca Chen is asking to speak with you." "Why?" "She says she wants to apologize and provide information that might help our investigation, but she'll only do it if you're present during the interview." "Why me specifically?" "She says you're the only person who understood the consequences of her actions from the beginning, and she wants to explain herself to someone who won't judge her motivations." "I absolutely will judge her motivations." Detective Martinez laughed. "That's what I told her." "But she's insisting. She says she has information about other financial crimes that she'll only reveal if you're there to hear it." Against my better judgment, I agreed to be present for Rebecca's interview. 3 days later, I found myself sitting in a police interview room, across from the woman who had accidentally destroyed her own life by sending me photos of her affair with my husband. Rebecca looked terrible. She was thin, pale, and had the hollow-eyed appearance of someone who hadn't been sleeping. She was wearing an orange jail uniform and handcuffs. "Sarah," she said when I walked in, "thank you for coming." "Rebecca." Detective Martinez and Detective Park set up recording equipment while Rebecca and I stared at each other across the metal table. "Before we begin," Detective Martinez said, "I want to remind everyone that this interview is being recorded and that anything said here can be used as evidence." Rebecca nodded. "I understand. I want to tell you everything." "Everything about what?" Detective Park asked. "Everything about the embezzlement, the affairs, the financial fraud. All of it. But first, I need to explain something to Sarah." She turned to look at me directly. "Sarah, I know you think I accidentally sent you those photos because I'm careless or stupid, but that's not what happened." "What do you mean?" "I sent them to you on purpose." The room went silent. Detective Martinez and Detective Park exchanged glances, and I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "You sent them to me on purpose?" "I sent them to you because I wanted David's wife to know what he was doing. I wanted you to catch us." "Why?" Rebecca took a shaky breath. "Because I was trapped in a relationship I couldn't end, with a man who was blackmailing me, and I needed someone else to stop it." "David was blackmailing you?" "David found out that I was embezzling money from Morrison Marketing. He threatened to expose me unless I continued the affair and helped him get promoted." I stared at Rebecca, trying to process what she was saying. "You're telling me that David forced you to have an affair with him?" "I'm telling you that what started as a consensual affair became coercion when David discovered my financial crimes and used that information to control me." Detective Park leaned forward. "Ms. Chen, are you saying that David Rodriguez was aware of your embezzlement at Morrison Marketing?" "David is the one who taught me how to do it." The room went silent again. I felt like I was hearing about a completely different person than the man I'd been married to for 7 years. "David taught you how to embezzle money?" "David had been skimming money from client accounts at Morrison for 2 years before I started working there. When we began our affair, he showed me how he was doing it and suggested I could use the same methods to supplement my income." "But David wasn't in accounting," I said. "He was in client services." "Client services gave him access to billing information and client contact details. He was inflating project costs and pocketing the difference, then splitting the money with me to keep me quiet about his methods." Detective Martinez was taking notes rapidly. "How much money are we talking about?" "Over the 2 years I was involved, we stole approximately $120,000 from Morrison Marketing clients." "And when you wanted to end the affair?" David threatened to tell Morrison's management that I was the one who had taught him the embezzlement methods. He said he'd claim I was the mastermind and he was just following my instructions. I felt sick. The man I'd been married to wasn't just an adulterer. He was a criminal who had been using another criminal to commit financial fraud. So you sent me the photos to get David caught and stop the blackmail? I sent you the photos because I knew you'd figure out a way to destroy both of us. I had seen how smart you were at company events, and I knew that if anyone could find a way to make David face consequences for his actions, it would be his wife. But you were destroyed too. I was already destroying myself. David's blackmail was escalating. He was demanding more money, more favors, more control over my career decisions. I knew it was only a matter of time before everything came out anyway. Rebecca looked down at her handcuffed hands. At least this way, I got to choose the timing. Detective Park looked up from his notes. Ms. Chen, you said you have information about other financial crimes? David has been using the same embezzlement methods at every company he's worked for since college. I have documentation of his crimes going back 6 years, involving 4 different employers. Why didn't you reveal this information 3 years ago? Because I thought I could start over at Hartwell & Associates and leave all the criminal activity behind. But the money I'd become accustomed to having, I couldn't adjust to living on just my salary. So you started embezzling again. I started embezzling again, but using improved methods that David had taught me, methods that were supposed to be undetectable. Until you accidentally sent that email to your assistant. Rebecca almost smiled. That wasn't an accident either. Everyone in the room stared at her. You deliberately sent incriminating evidence to your assistant? I deliberately sent it to someone I knew would report it immediately, just like I deliberately sent David's photos to his wife, and just like I deliberately sent my billing fraud information to Morrison's competitor in 2019. You've been sabotaging yourself deliberately? I've been creating situations where other people would be forced to stop me from doing things I couldn't stop myself from doing. Dr. Williams had been right about Rebecca having a psychological compulsion, but wrong about it being unconscious. Rebecca had been consciously orchestrating her own downfall. Why? I asked. Because I couldn't figure out how to stop on my own. Every time I tried to quit stealing money or end an affair or stop lying to James, I'd find a reason to continue. The only way I could break the cycle was to get caught. But getting caught has destroyed your life. Getting caught has saved my life. If I'd continued on the path I was on, I would have eventually stolen enough money to face federal charges, or James would have discovered everything and taken the children away permanently, or David would have escalated his blackmail to the point where I ended up doing something even worse. Rebecca looked directly at me. Sarah, when I sent you those photos, I was hoping you'd be smart enough to destroy David's career along with mine. I was hoping you'd find a way to make sure he faced consequences for all of his crimes, not just the affair. But I didn't know about his financial crimes. I know. That's why I'm telling you now. Detective Martinez closed his notebook. Ms. Chen, this information about David Rodriguez's financial crimes, do you have documentation to support these allegations? I have bank records, email correspondence, and encrypted files that detail every theft David has committed for the past 6 years. I kept meticulous records because I knew someday I'd need them to protect myself. Where are these records? In a safety deposit box at First National Bank. The key is in my jewelry box at home. Detective Martinez looked at Detective Park, then at me. Ms. Rodriguez, I think we're going to need to speak with your ex-husband. 2 hours later, I walked out of the police station feeling like my entire understanding of my marriage had been turned upside down. David wasn't just an unfaithful husband. He was a career criminal who had been using our joint finances to fund his illegal activities. I called my divorce attorney immediately. Julia, it's Sarah. I need to reopen my divorce case. Why? What's happened? I just found out that David was embezzling money throughout our marriage, and he used our joint accounts to launder the stolen funds. How did you find out? His affair partner just confessed to police that David has been committing financial fraud for 6 years, including during our marriage. Julia was quiet for a moment. Sarah, if David was using your joint accounts for criminal activity, you might be entitled to additional compensation. And if he was stealing money during your marriage, the court might consider that dissipation of marital assets. What does that mean? It means we might be able to go back to court and argue that David owes you money for the stolen funds he kept hidden during your divorce proceedings. That afternoon, I received a call from Detective Martinez. Ms. Rodriguez, we've arrested David Rodriguez on charges of embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. During our search of his apartment, we found evidence that supports Rebecca Chen's allegations. What kind of evidence? Financial records showing systematic theft from 4 different employers, including transactions that occurred during your marriage. We're going to need to examine your family's financial records from that period. Of course. There's something else. We found evidence that David has been continuing his embezzlement activities at his current job. His current job? He's been working as a financial consultant for a small investment firm. According to the records we found, he's stolen approximately $80,000 from client accounts over the past 2 years. I sat down heavily. David hadn't learned anything from getting caught with Rebecca. He'd just become more careful about hiding his crimes. Detective Martinez, Rebecca said that David taught her his methods. Does that mean he's been teaching other people how to embezzle money? We're investigating that possibility. We've identified at least 3 other former Morrison marketing employees who left the company under suspicious circumstances around the same time David and Rebecca were there. How many people are we talking about? Potentially dozens of victims across multiple companies and several years. David Rodriguez may have been running what amounts to an embezzlement training program. That evening, I sat in my living room trying to process everything I'd learned. The man I'd been married to for 7 years had been a criminal mastermind who had been using our marriage as a cover for financial fraud schemes. I'd thought Rebecca's affair with David was about 2 selfish people who couldn't resist their attraction to each other. Instead, it had been about a career criminal blackmailing his accomplice to continue their illegal activities. I'd thought I was the victim of an unfaithful husband. Instead, I'd been married to someone who had been stealing money and teaching others to steal money, possibly using our joint bank accounts to hide his crimes. The next morning, I called James Chen. James, it's Sarah. I assume you've heard about the new charges against David? I heard. I also heard that Rebecca claims David was blackmailing her. Do you believe her? James was quiet for a moment. Honestly, yes. It explains a lot about Rebecca's behavior over the past few years. I always wondered why she seemed so anxious all the time, why she was always worried about money despite making good money. It doesn't excuse her choices. No, it doesn't. But it helps me understand why she made them. What are you going to do now? I'm going to ask for full custody of the children. Not because I want to punish Rebecca, but because they need stability while she deals with the consequences of her crimes. That seems reasonable. Sarah, I want you to know that I'm grateful for how you handled this situation 3 years ago. If you had just exposed Rebecca's affair publicly instead of working with me to handle it professionally, we never would have learned about David's criminal activities. How do you figure that? Because Rebecca would have been focused on managing a public scandal instead of looking for ways to stop David's escalating blackmail. She wouldn't have created the situation that eventually led to both of them being caught. I thought about that conversation for the rest of the day. James was suggesting that my decision to handle Rebecca's affair strategically had ultimately led to exposing a much larger criminal conspiracy. Maybe my instinct to be smart instead of emotional had been the right choice after all. A week later, David was formally charged with embezzlement, fraud, money laundering, and running a criminal enterprise. The prosecution estimated that his various schemes had stolen over $500,000 from clients and employers across 6 years. Rebecca was charged with embezzlement and conspiracy, but she received a more lenient sentence in exchange for her cooperation in exposing David's larger operation. My divorce attorney successfully argued that David's hidden criminal income constituted dissipation of marital assets, and the court awarded me an additional $75,000 in damages. But more importantly, the investigation led to the exposure of an embezzlement ring that had been operating across multiple companies in the Dallas area. 7 other people were charged with financial crimes, and dozens of victims recovered stolen money. 6 months later, I received a letter from Rebecca in prison. Dear Sarah, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to thank you for being smart enough to handle my mistake in a way that eventually led to justice for everyone involved. When I sent you those photos, I was hoping you'd find a way to stop David from continuing to blackmail me. I never imagined that your response would lead to exposing his entire criminal operation and helping so many other victims recover their stolen money. You were right to handle everything strategically instead of emotionally. If you had just confronted David immediately, or if you had posted the photos publicly, none of the larger crimes would have been discovered. I'm serving 3 years in prison, but I'm also getting the help I needed to address the underlying issues that led to my criminal behavior. For the first time in years, I'm not lying to anyone about anything. Voso iso. James and the children are doing well. He brings them to visit sometimes, and we're working on rebuilding our relationship in an honest way. I don't know if our marriage can be saved, but at least our family can heal. David is serving 8 years in federal prison. I hope he uses that time to figure out why he chose to become a career criminal instead of using his intelligence for legitimate purposes. I hope you've found happiness in your new life. You deserved so much better than what both David and I put you through. Thank you for being the person who was smart enough to turn our mistakes into justice for everyone. Sincerely, Rebecca. I read the letter twice, then filed it away with the other documents from my divorce. Rebecca was right that I'd handled their affair strategically instead of emotionally. But what she didn't know was that her mistake in sending me those photos had taught me something valuable about the power of using other people's poor decisions against them. That lesson had influenced how I'd handled every situation since then, with Lisa, with the readers of my blog, with the clients I'd consulted for through my work with divorce attorneys. Sometimes the best response to betrayal isn't immediate confrontation. Sometimes it's careful planning that turns one person's mistake into justice for multiple people. Rebecca's accidental photo had destroyed her affair with David, ended both their careers, exposed David's criminal enterprise, helped dozens of victims recover stolen money, and taught me skills that I'd use to help other people protect themselves from similar betrayals. All because she'd been careless with her phone's contact list. Or because she'd been smart enough to realize that the only way to stop David's blackmail was to create a situation where someone else would be forced to destroy him. Either way, her mistake had led to the best possible outcome for everyone except the criminals. And sometimes that's exactly what justice looks like. But David's story wasn't over either. 2 years into David's federal prison sentence, I received a call that would reveal just how deep his criminal network had gone. Ms. Rodriguez? This is Agent Sarah Kim with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. We need to speak with you about your ex-husband's activities. I thought David's case was closed. He's already in federal prison. Mr. Rodriguez's individual case is closed, but we've discovered that his embezzlement schemes were part of a much larger operation. We believe he was training people in financial fraud techniques and taking a percentage of their stolen funds. I felt a chill. How much larger? We've identified potential connections to financial crimes in 12 states, involving over 200 victims and approximately $3.2 million in stolen funds. Agent Kim asked me to meet her at the FBI field office the following day. When I arrived, I was led to a conference room where the walls were covered with photographs, financial charts, and what looked like a massive organizational diagram. Ms. Rodriguez, thank you for coming in. I know this is difficult, but we need your help understanding how your ex-husband's operation worked. Agent Kim gestured to the wall of evidence. What we've discovered is that David Rodriguez wasn't just embezzling money from his employers. He was recruiting other employees at various companies and teaching them embezzlement techniques in exchange for a percentage of their stolen funds. I studied the organizational chart, which showed David at the center with lines connecting him to dozens of other people. This looks like a pyramid scheme. That's exactly what it was. A pyramid scheme for financial fraud. Agent Kim pulled out a thick file. According to our investigation, David would identify employees at companies where he was consulting or doing business. Employees who had access to financial systems and who appeared to be experiencing money problems. How would he identify them? Through conversation, mostly. He was very good at getting people to talk about their financial stress, their student loans, their family obligations. Once he identified someone who was struggling financially and had access to company funds, He would gradually introduce the idea that their employer was taking advantage of them. He was recruiting them to steal? He was convincing them that skimming small amounts from company accounts wasn't really stealing. It was just evening the score for being underpaid. Agent Kim opened the file to show me printed emails and text messages. David would start by suggesting minor infractions. Inflating an expense report by $20, claiming overtime that wasn't worked, small things that seemed harmless. And then escalate from there? Once someone had crossed the line into minor fraud, David would point out that they'd already committed a crime. He'd then offer to teach them safer methods of taking money, methods that were less likely to be detected. I felt sick thinking about how many people David had corrupted. And his percentage? Typically 20 to 30% of everything his recruits stole. He maintained detailed records of each person's activities and required regular payments. So he was running a criminal enterprise while married to me? According to our timeline, David started recruiting his first accomplices about 6 months after you were married. The operation grew significantly over the following years. Agent Kim showed me financial records that documented money flowing from various sources into accounts that David had kept hidden during our divorce. Ms. Rodriguez, we estimate that during your marriage, David received approximately $180,000 in proceeds from his recruits' embezzlement activities. Money that he hid from me during our divorce proceedings. Money that he hid from everyone. David was very careful to keep his criminal income separate from his legitimate finances. What do you need from me? We need help understanding David's psychology and methods. You lived with him for 7 years. You may have observed behaviors or patterns that could help us understand how he identified and recruited his victims. I spent the next 3 hours helping Agent Kim analyze David's personality and methods. As we talked, I began to recognize patterns in his behavior that I'd never understood during our marriage. David was always very good at making people feel comfortable sharing personal information, I told Agent Kim. At parties or business events, he'd have people telling him their life stories within minutes of meeting them. Can you give me an example? At our company Christmas party 2 years before our divorce, I watched David spend an hour talking to a woman from the accounting department. By the end of the conversation, she'd told him about her divorce, her custody battle, her student loan debt, and her sick mother's medical bills. Did you think that was unusual? I thought he was being friendly and supportive, but now I'm wondering if he was evaluating her as a potential recruit. Agent Kim made notes as I described other instances where David had seemed unusually interested in people's financial problems. What about his travel schedule? She asked. Did David travel frequently for work? Constantly. He was always flying to client sites for, quote, consultation meetings. Sometimes he'd be gone for a week at a time. Did he ever mention meeting with the same people repeatedly at different companies? I thought about that question. Actually, yes. There were certain names that came up frequently when he talked about his work. People he described as, quote, key contacts at various client companies. Do you remember any specific names? I provided Agent Kim with every name I could remember David mentioning during our marriage. Many of them turned out to be people who were now under investigation for embezzlement at their respective companies. Ms. Rodriguez, based on what you've told us, I believe David was using his legitimate consulting work as a cover for recruiting and managing his criminal network. You mean his entire career was a front for fraud? We think David was genuinely good at his legitimate work, but he was using that reputation to gain access to companies where he could identify potential recruits. As I left the FBI office, I felt overwhelmed by the scope of David's criminal activities. The man I'd been married to hadn't just been cheating on me with Rebecca. He'd been running a multi-state criminal enterprise that had stolen millions of dollars from dozens of companies. But I also felt a strange sense of validation. My instinct to handle Rebecca's affair strategically instead of emotionally had been even more important than I'd realized. If I'd just confronted David immediately about the affair, none of his larger crimes would have been discovered. That evening, I called my therapist to process what I'd learned. How are you feeling about these revelations? Dr. Williams asked. Honestly, I'm relieved. Relieved? Relieved that my marriage ended when it did. If David had continued his criminal activities while we were married, I could have been implicated as an accomplice. Even if you didn't know about his crimes? Even if I didn't know, the FBI said that spouses can be held liable for benefiting from criminal proceeds, even if they're unaware of the source. Dr. Williams nodded. So in a sense, Rebecca's affair may have protected you from much more serious consequences. Rebecca's affair exposed David's crimes early enough that I was able to distance myself before they escalated to federal charges. How do you feel about Rebecca now? I thought about that question. I'm starting to think Rebecca was smarter than any of us gave her credit for. She found a way to expose David's crimes and escape his blackmail, while also protecting me from being implicated in his larger operation. You think she sent you those photos to protect you? I think she sent me those photos because she knew I was the one person who would be motivated to destroy David completely, rather than just ending the affair. The next week, I received a call from Rebecca's attorney. Ms. Rodriguez, I'm calling because Rebecca would like to meet with you again. She has information about David's criminal network that she thinks you should know. What kind of information? Information about other wives who may be in situations similar to what you were in. Women who are married to men in David's network and don't know about their husband's criminal activities. I agreed to meet with Rebecca, this time at the federal prison where she was serving her sentence. Sarah, Rebecca said when I walked into the visiting room, thank you for coming. I know this is hard for you. What information do you have? David kept detailed records of everyone in his network, including information about their families. He had files on the wives and children of his recruits, because he considered family relationships to be leverage that could keep people from betraying him. What kind of files? Financial information, social media profiles, details about their daily routines. David was paranoid about security, so he monitored the people who were closest to his recruits. Rebecca handed me a handwritten list of names. These are women whose husbands are part of David's network, and who don't know about their husband's criminal activities. I looked at the list and recognized several of the names from social media, women I'd seen at company events or community functions. How do you know they don't know? Because David specifically recruited men who could hide their criminal income from their families. He considered wives who asked questions about money to be security risks, so he deliberately targeted men who could lie to their wives. He targeted men who were already lying to their wives about something: gambling, affairs, debt, addiction. Men who had experience keeping secrets from their spouses. I studied the list more carefully. Rebecca, what am I supposed to do with this information? I think you should warn them. Not about their husband's specific crimes, but about the possibility that their family finances might not be what they think they are. How am I supposed to do that without revealing how I know? The same way you handled my affair with David, strategically. Rebecca leaned forward. Sarah, you have a blog about accidentally discovered infidelity. You've been helping women navigate betrayal for years. You could use those same skills to help these wives discover whether their husbands are hiding financial crimes. I thought about Rebecca's suggestion as I drove home. She was right that I'd developed expertise in helping people uncover hidden betrayals. But David's criminal network was much more complex than simple adultery. That evening, I researched each of the names on Rebecca's list. What I found was disturbing. Several of these women had been posting on social media about unexplained financial improvements in their lives. New cars, expensive vacations, home renovations, all funded by money their husbands claimed to have earned through bonuses or consulting fees. I decided to start with one case that seemed particularly urgent. A woman named Jennifer Walsh, whose husband Mark had recently surprised her with a $40,000 kitchen renovation that he claimed was funded by a, quote, performance bonus from his accounting job. According to the FBI's records, Mark Walsh had stolen over $60,000 from his employer in the past 18 months. I sent Jennifer a carefully worded private message through social media. Hi Jennifer, I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I saw your beautiful kitchen renovation photos, and I wanted to ask about your experience with sudden financial windfalls. I'm researching a blog post about how spouses can protect themselves when their partners receive unexpected money. Would you be willing to share how you verified the source of your husband's bonus? I'm particularly interested in how wives can ensure that surprise money is legitimate and won't create future problems for their families. Jennifer responded within hours. "Hi Sarah, I'd be happy to help with your research. To be honest, I didn't verify Mark's bonus at all. I just trusted him when he said his company had rewarded him for excellent performance. Should I have asked for documentation?" I spent the next week helping Jennifer understand how to research her husband's employment and financial claims without creating suspicion. I taught her how to access public records, how to verify employment information, and how to identify red flags in financial documentation. Within 2 weeks, Jennifer had discovered that her husband's employer had no record of giving him a performance bonus. When she confronted Mark with this information, he broke down and confessed to embezzling money from client accounts. "Sarah," Jennifer called me in tears, "Mark told me he's been stealing money for over a year. He says he's part of some kind of network run by a man named David Rodriguez. Jennifer, you need to contact the FBI immediately. He's begging me not to turn him in. He says he'll pay the money back and get out of the network. Jennifer, your husband is part of a federal criminal investigation. If you don't report this voluntarily, you could be charged as an accomplice when the investigation expands." Jennifer ultimately contacted the FBI and cooperated with their investigation. Mark was arrested and agreed to testify against David and other members of the network in exchange for a reduced sentence. But more importantly, Jennifer's cooperation led to the exposure of 3 other network members and helped a dozen victims recover stolen money. Over the next 6 months, I used similar approaches to help 4 other wives discover their husband's involvement in David's network. In each case, the wife's cooperation with authorities led to additional arrests and financial recoveries for victims. "You've become a one-woman financial crime task force," Agent Kim told me during one of our regular check-ins. "I've become someone who helps people discover truths they need to know, regardless of how painful those truths might be." How do you handle the emotional toll of destroying so many marriages? I thought about that question. I'm not destroying marriages. I'm exposing existing problems that were already destroying marriages. These women deserve to know that their husbands were criminals who were putting their families at risk of prosecution. And the children involved? The children deserve to have at least one parent who isn't living a lie. Agent Kim nodded. "We've recovered over $800,000 in stolen funds as a direct result of information provided by the wives you've helped. That money is being returned to victims who might never have seen it otherwise." What's the status of David's case? David is cooperating with our investigation in exchange for a potential reduction in his sentence. He's provided information about network members in other states and helped us understand the full scope of the operation. Is he showing any remorse? David claims he's remorseful, but he also keeps trying to minimize his role and blame his recruits for their own choices. That sounded like the David I'd been married to, always looking for ways to avoid taking full responsibility for his actions. 6 months later, the FBI's investigation concluded with 37 arrests across 12 states. David's network had stolen approximately $4.2 million from various employers, and authorities were able to recover about 60% of the stolen funds. David received an additional 2 years added to his sentence for running a criminal enterprise, despite his cooperation with the investigation. Rebecca was released from prison after serving 18 months of her 3-year sentence, in recognition of her cooperation and her role in exposing the larger network. But the most satisfying outcome was a call I received from Jennifer Walsh 6 months after her husband's arrest. "Sarah, I wanted to thank you for helping me discover the truth about Mark's crimes. How are you and the children doing?" "We're doing well. The divorce was finalized last month, and I've started a new job at a nonprofit that helps families affected by financial crimes." "That sounds perfect for you." "It is. And Sarah, I've been thinking about starting a support group for women whose husbands were involved in David's network. Would you be willing to help me organize it?" "I'd be honored to help." Jennifer's support group became a model that was replicated in other cities where David's network had operated. Women who had discovered their husbands' crimes found community with each other and developed expertise in helping other families navigate similar betrayals. 2 years after the FBI investigation concluded, I received an invitation to speak at a conference on financial crime prevention. "Ms. Rodriguez," the conference organizer told me, "your work in exposing David Rodriguez's criminal network has become a case study in how civilian cooperation can enhance federal investigations. I was just trying to help women discover whether their husbands were lying to them. And in the process, you dismantled one of the most sophisticated embezzlement rings we've ever encountered. At the conference, I met other people who had played similar roles in exposing financial crimes, accountants who had questioned suspicious transactions, employees who had reported unusual behavior, family members who had asked uncomfortable questions about unexplained money. What we all have in common, I told the audience during my presentation, is that we chose to be smart instead of trusting. We chose to ask questions instead of accepting convenient explanations. After my presentation, a woman approached me with a familiar story. "Ms. Rodriguez, I think my husband might be involved in financial crimes. He's been bringing home a lot of extra money lately, and his explanations don't make sense. Can you help me figure out what to do?" And so it continued. Rebecca's accidental photo had led to exposing David's affair, which had led to discovering his embezzlement, which had led to uncovering his criminal network, which had led to helping dozens of other women discover their husbands' crimes. One mistake had created a ripple effect that ultimately protected hundreds of people from financial fraud. But there was still one more chapter to this story. 4 years after David's conviction, I received a phone call that made my blood run cold. "Ms. Rodriguez? This is Officer Patricia Hayes with the Federal Bureau of Prisons. I'm calling to inform you that David Rodriguez was released from federal custody this morning." I sat down heavily. "He served his full sentence?" "No, ma'am. Mr. Rodriguez was released early for good behavior and cooperation with ongoing investigations. He served 6 years of his 10-year sentence. What does that mean for the people he helped convict?" Mr. Rodriguez's cooperation was instrumental in securing convictions against 23 other defendants. The sentencing judge felt that his assistance warranted early release. After I hung up, I immediately called Agent Kim. "I heard," she said before I could speak, "David was released this morning. Is there anything I should be concerned about?" "David is on supervised release for the next 4 years. He's required to report to a probation officer weekly, and he's prohibited from accessing financial systems or working in any capacity that involves handling other people's money. But he's free. He's free but monitored. Sarah, I want you to know that David has been asking about you." My heart stopped. "What kind of asking?" "He's been requesting information about your current address, your work, your personal life. His probation officer has denied all requests for contact information, but David has been persistent. Does he know about my work helping other wives expose their husbands' crimes?" "David has been following news coverage of the cases that resulted from his network's exposure. He's aware that you played a role in several arrests." Agent Kim paused. "Sarah, I need to ask you something. Have you received any unusual phone calls, messages, or contacts in the past few weeks?" "What kind of contacts?" "David was released to a halfway house in Dallas 3 weeks ago. He's been out on day passes for job interviews and appointments. We've been monitoring his activities, but there have been some gaps in surveillance." I felt a chill of fear. "You think he's been trying to contact me?" "We think he may have been conducting surveillance on you, driving by your house, your office, places you frequent." "Why would he do that?" "We're not sure. But Sarah, I want you to be very careful. David blames you for the complete destruction of his criminal network and his extended prison sentence." "He blames me? I didn't make him commit crimes. David has convinced himself that if you had handled Rebecca's affair differently, if you had just confronted him privately instead of exposing everything publicly, none of his other crimes would have been discovered. That's insane. David has had 6 years in prison to develop theories about how his life was destroyed by your choices rather than his own actions." Agent Kim gave me her direct phone number and instructions to call immediately if David attempted any contact with me. That evening, I installed a security system in my house and began varying my daily routines. I also called my attorney to discuss whether I needed additional legal protection. "Sarah," my attorney said, "David can't legally contact you directly because of the restraining order that was put in place during your divorce proceedings. But that doesn't mean he won't try. What should I do?" "Document everything. If you see him, if you receive any suspicious communications, if anything feels wrong, document it and report it immediately." I spent the next week in a state of hypervigilance, constantly checking my surroundings and monitoring my security system. But nothing happened. Then, on Friday evening, I found an envelope slipped under my front door. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten message. Sarah, I know you won't take my calls, but I need to speak with you. There are things you don't understand about what happened between Rebecca and me, and why everything unfolded the way it did. Meet me at Riverside Park tomorrow at 2 p.m., at the bench where you used to feed the ducks when we were married. Come alone. David. I stared at the note, my hands shaking. David remembered that I used to feed ducks at Riverside Park. He'd been watching me closely enough during our marriage to notice my routines, and he was using that knowledge to prove he could still reach me. I immediately called Agent Kim. Don't go, she said without hesitation. This is exactly the kind of contact David is prohibited from making. But what if he has information about other victims or ongoing crimes? Sarah, David is a master manipulator who spent 6 years in prison planning how to regain control over the situation. Whatever he wants to tell you is designed to benefit him, not you. What should I do? We'll have surveillance teams at the park tomorrow. If David shows up for this meeting, we'll arrest him for violating the terms of his release. But I couldn't stop thinking about David's note. What could he possibly want to tell me that was worth risking his freedom? Against Agent Kim's advice, and against my own better judgment, I decided to go to the meeting. But I wasn't going alone. I called Robert Chen, the retired detective who worked with Holloway and Associates. Robert, I need backup for a potentially dangerous situation. What kind of situation? I explained about David's release and his request for a meeting. Robert immediately agreed to provide surveillance and backup. I'll position myself where I can see the entire park, he said. If anything feels wrong, I'll intervene immediately. Saturday afternoon, I arrived at Riverside Park 15 minutes early. Robert was already in position, and I could see FBI surveillance teams stationed around the perimeter. At exactly 2 p.m., David walked to the bench where I was sitting. He looked older, grayer, and harder than the man I'd been married to. Prison had changed him physically, but his eyes still held the same calculating intelligence I remembered. Hello, Sarah. Hello, David. He sat down on the opposite end of the bench, maintaining distance between us. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. I'm here because you said you had information I needed to know. What is it? David was quiet for a moment, studying my face. You look good. Success suits you. David, you're violating the terms of your release by contacting me. Whatever you want to say it quickly. I want to tell you the truth about Rebecca. What truth? The truth about who really planned my downfall. I stared at David, trying to read his expression. What are you talking about? Sarah, Rebecca didn't accidentally send you those photos. And she wasn't a victim of my blackmail. She was my partner. Your partner in what? In planning the destruction of my criminal network. I felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. That's impossible. Rebecca and I planned the entire scenario that led to my arrest. The affair, the photos, the accidental exposure, all of it was designed to create a controlled situation where I could cooperate with federal authorities while protecting the core assets of my operation. Why would you want to be arrested? Because federal investigators were closing in anyway. Rebecca had inside information about the FBI's investigation timeline. We had maybe 6 months before they would have enough evidence to charge me. David leaned forward slightly. So we created a scenario where I would be arrested for smaller crimes first, allowing me to cooperate with investigators and protect the majority of my stolen funds. You're lying. I'm telling you the truth that Rebecca has been hiding for 8 years. She wasn't my victim. She was my co-conspirator. Then why did she go to prison? Because someone had to. But Rebecca served 18 months while I served 6 years. She kept the majority of our hidden assets while I took the blame for organizing the network. I stood up, preparing to leave. David, you're delusional. Rebecca exposed your crimes because you were blackmailing her. Rebecca exposed some of my crimes while helping me hide others. The network you helped destroy? That was only about 30% of my actual operation. David pulled out a manila envelope. Sarah, I have documentation that proves Rebecca and I have been working together since before our affair began. Bank records, email communications, evidence that she helped me identify victims and plan embezzlement schemes. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know that you've been manipulated by someone who is much smarter and more dangerous than I ever was. I don't believe you. Then explain how Rebecca knew exactly which photos to send you to guarantee that you would react in a way that exposed my crimes but protected her larger interests. David opened the envelope and handed me printed emails between him and Rebecca, dated months before their affair supposedly began. These emails discuss the Sarah problem and strategies for managing the investigation timeline, David said. Rebecca knew federal investigators were closing in, and she needed a way to control how and when I was arrested. I read the emails with growing horror. They detailed plans for Rebecca to accidentally expose David's crimes in a way that would force him to cooperate with investigators while protecting what they called core assets. Rebecca manipulated you into destroying the public face of my operation while allowing her to escape with millions of dollars in hidden funds, David continued. Where are these funds now? Offshore accounts that Rebecca controls. She's been living very comfortably for the past 4 years, while maintaining the fiction that she's a reformed criminal who cooperated with authorities. I looked up from the emails, my mind racing. If this is true, why haven't you told the FBI? Because Rebecca and I made an agreement. I take the blame for the network and serve the prison time, while she maintains the hidden assets and provides financial support for my family while I'm incarcerated. What family? We're divorced. My mother, my sister, my nieces and nephews. Rebecca has been supporting them financially while I've been in prison. David pulled out bank records showing regular payments from accounts controlled by Rebecca to members of David's family. Sarah, I'm telling you this because Rebecca is about to disappear. She's liquidating the offshore accounts and planning to leave the country. Once she's gone, you'll never be able to recover the money that rightfully belongs to the victims of our crimes. Why do you care about the victims now? I don't care about the victims. I care about revenge. David's mask slipped, revealing the cold calculation I remembered from our marriage. Rebecca betrayed our agreement. She was supposed to share the hidden assets with me when I was released. Instead, she's planning to keep everything for herself. So this isn't about justice. This is about you wanting your share of stolen money. This is about you realizing that the woman you trusted to expose my crimes is actually the mastermind behind a much larger operation. I stood up and backed away from the bench. David, even if what you're saying is true, it doesn't change the fact that you committed crimes and deserve to go to prison. You're right. I committed crimes, and I deserved consequences. But Rebecca committed worse crimes and manipulated you into helping her escape those consequences. What do you want me to do with this information? I want you to stop Rebecca before she disappears with money that belongs to the people we stole from. David stood up and handed me the envelope of documents. These emails and bank records prove that Rebecca has been controlling millions of dollars in stolen funds. If you give this information to the FBI, they can freeze her accounts before she leaves the country. And what do you get out of it? I get the satisfaction of knowing that Rebecca won't escape justice while I rotted in prison. I looked at David, this man who had betrayed me, stolen from countless victims, and destroyed multiple families, and realized that even if he was lying about Rebecca's involvement, the documents he'd given me could help authorities recover stolen money. David, if I take this information to the FBI, you'll be violating the terms of your release by giving me evidence of ongoing crimes. I'm already violating my release by contacting you, but I'd rather go back to prison knowing that Rebecca faces consequences than stay free knowing she escaped with millions of dollars. Why should I believe anything you tell me? David looked directly at me for the first time during our conversation. Because you're smart enough to verify everything I've told you. Check the dates on those emails. Research Rebecca's financial activities since her release. Follow the money trail. And if you're lying, if I'm lying, the FBI will figure that out quickly and I'll go back to prison for violating my release terms. I have nothing left to lose, Sarah. I took the envelope and walked away without saying goodbye. That evening, I called Agent Kim and requested an emergency meeting. Agent Kim, I need you to look at some documents that David gave me. Sarah, please tell me you didn't meet with him. I met with him under surveillance. But the information he provided could be important. I handed Agent Kim the envelope of emails and bank records. She read through them silently, her expression becoming more serious with each page. If these documents are authentic, she said finally, they suggest that Rebecca Chen has been controlling significant hidden assets throughout the entire investigation. Could David be fabricating this evidence? The email metadata appears genuine, and the bank records reference accounts that we were never able to locate during our investigation. Agent Kim looked up at me. Sarah, if David is telling the truth about Rebecca, it means that your role in exposing his network was even more complex than we realized. What do you mean? It means that Rebecca may have manipulated you into destroying David's operations specifically, so she could maintain control of the hidden assets. So I was a tool in Rebecca's plan. You were an effective tool that Rebecca used to achieve her own objectives while appearing to cooperate with law enforcement. Agent Kim gathered the documents. We'll need to verify all of this information, but if it's accurate, we'll reopen the investigation immediately. 2 weeks later, Agent Kim called with an update. Sarah, the documents David provided were authentic. We've located the offshore accounts Rebecca was controlling, and we've discovered evidence that she's been planning to flee the country. Have you arrested her? We arrested Rebecca this morning as she was attempting to board a flight to a non-extradition country. She had $2.3 million in cash and bearer bonds in her luggage. Money stolen from David's victims? Money stolen from David's victims, plus additional funds from crimes that we're still investigating. Rebecca has been operating her own criminal network parallel to David's operation. I felt a strange mix of vindication and betrayal. My instincts about Rebecca had been wrong from the beginning. Agent Kim, what happens to David now? David violated his release terms by contacting you, so he's back in federal custody. But his cooperation in exposing Rebecca's activities will likely result in a reduced sentence. And the victims? We'll be able to return approximately $1.8 million to victims who lost money to both David and Rebecca's operations. It's not everything, but it's significantly more than we would have recovered without David's information. 3 months later, Rebecca was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for money laundering, conspiracy, and operating a criminal enterprise. The judge noted that her manipulation of law enforcement during the original investigation was an aggravating factor that warranted a harsh sentence. David received an additional 6 months for violating his release terms, but his cooperation in exposing Rebecca resulted in a recommendation for early release consideration after serving 75% of his remaining sentence. But the most important outcome was a call I received from Jennifer Walsh, the first woman I'd helped expose her husband's crimes. Sarah, she said, I wanted to thank you one more time. Not just for helping me discover the truth about Mark, but for teaching me that sometimes the worst betrayals can become the foundation for helping others. Jennifer had started a nonprofit organization that helped families affected by financial crimes, and she'd helped over 50 women escape situations similar to what we'd both experienced. You turned Rebecca's mistake into justice for so many people, she continued. That's the real victory here. As I hung up the phone, I realized she was right. Rebecca had meant to send David photos that would make him happy. Instead, she'd accidentally sent them to the one person who would turn their criminal empire into a force for protecting others. Sometimes the biggest mistakes create the most important opportunities. You just have to be smart enough to recognize them. The end.